Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to discuss the findings and recommendations section of a mishap report. Now, within the ASMIS 2 mishap and near miss reporting tool, findings can be entered based on one of three different factors: environmental factors, human factors, and material factors. In the context of the mishap that we're building as part of this video tutorial series, findings and recs are not required because it's a Class C mishap. However, if we had an aviation Class A, B, or C, or a ground Class A, B, findings and recommendations would be required, and we would not be asked if we want to enter findings and recommendations. So let's get started with an environmental factor first, and let's enter a finding. So because it's an environmental factor, there are three things that we must have that must be associated together. First, a piece of equipment, which we have, a 15-passenger van. Second, the person, which we have. Third, an environmental condition that's already been identified as being present at the time of the mishap. And in this case, we do have one: rain. So from here, once we make those selections, the rest of the finding is based on a few questions about when and where, the actual environmental factor encountered, the consequences that had as a result, and then an explanation of how the environmental condition caused the mishap. So hold that thought for 1 second as we go back. And let's take a look now at material factors. Now, with a material factor, you can only do this if there is at least one component part failure. And what this means is a component or part failed, and that failure caused the mishap. So there's not much we can do with this page at the moment, but just keep that in mind as we move on with the discussion. Now, the third and newest type of factor is a human factor. And with the ASMIS 2 mishap and near miss reporting tool, we're now implementing and supporting the DoD HFACS version 7 codes. And this is good, it's significant, because this is something we in the Army have never had before. So the mishap and near miss reporting tool allows you to enter and select codes in one of two different ways. If you have done this before, if you are an expert, which most formal investigators are, you can make the first selection that says you've already determined the active and latent failure codes. So by doing that, we simply specify when and where the mistake or error occurred. We associate the equipment to the person, and then we select the active, because again, we're in the active failure, the active code, or the mistake code for the active failure. Then we move to latent failures. Now, a latent failure is something that happened before the active failure. And whereas we can only specify one active failure, there can be multiple latent failures. And so because we told the application that we've already determined the codes, all it's expecting us to do at this point is merely select the code that applies, provide an explanation, and then click Save. So hold that thought one moment. If we go back to human factors and add a finding and say, I have not determined the active failure and latent failure codes, we still have the when and where, we still have the equipment and the person involved. But now it's a little bit different because the application is now asking us a few questions. Did the mishap person make a performance-based error? If we say yes, then we have performance-based errors from which to select. Following that, we describe how the task activity was performed, any directing or governing performance of the task, and then we describe the consequences as a result of the mistake. Now, within latent failures, if you remember what this pop-up looked like just now, it's now more of a wizard-typed format. So we start with support. And the first question is, was support provided to the individual to perform the task? So if we say no, then we go straight to the standards. Do standards procedures exist for the task? If we say no, we go straight to training. So let's back up a step. If we answer yes to the first question, then another question is presented. Was the type, capability, amount, or condition of support sufficient to perform the task? If we answer yes, we go straight to standards. If we answer no, then we're asked if an issue with the resource created or led to the unsafe condition. So again, if we pick yes, what the application is doing at this point is picking the potential failure codes that are applicable based on the answers given. So if we say no, then we're now prompted with, did the technological environment affect the mishap persons? Depending on the answer, we now have another filtered list from which to pick. So moving on to standards. If standards do not exist, we go straight to training. If they do exist, are they clear and practical? If yes, we go straight to training. Why? Because standards are not the basis of the finding. If we say no, then we're presented with another question. Did an organizational written standard or written policy or lack of such standard at any level create the unsafe condition? If we say yes, we have yet another filtered list of codes from which to pick. So without belaboring this, what you can see from this is the fact that as you answer questions based on what you know, the mishap and near miss reporting tool is filtering and helping you select the codes that apply to your specific finding. So this is a very significant enhancement to anything we've had before. So having done that, let's go back to the environmental factor that we know did actually apply to our mishap. So we can select the van, select the person, and select the environmental condition. So when and where did the factor occur? So I'm merely just typing some inputs here, but the bottom line is you can use these text boxes to specify all of the different elements of how this environmental factor is indeed a finding. So we hit save and continue. And now we're taken to the recommendations tab. So when we add a recommendation, it's important to note that a recommendation can be applied at the unit level, at a level above the unit, or it could be an Army-wide level action. So in this case, when we look at the fact that rain and puddling on the highway cause hydroplaning, that could potentially be an Army level action, but at the same time, we can mark unknown as well and provide the recommendation. So the bottom line is, recommendations entered take on a larger meaning if they're Army level recommendations. So the ASMIS 2 mishap and near miss reporting tool supports the implementation of findings and recommendations quite effectively. In the next video, we're going to talk about supporting documentation.